The girls from Greenwich are here. They just gave us one of the delights from the San Moritz Bakery up there. Boy, it really is sweet.
To die.
Just beautiful.
Right?
All right, let's talk about this big rating the records controversy that's erupted over the last couple of weeks. Actually, it's been simmering now for months, but it came to a head in Washington. Frank Zappa was one of the people who testified before the Senate committee there. So you all know Frank. He's had a long career in music. And we're joined by Rick Rizzi, I'm sorry, Rick, who is the father of an 11-year-old daughter. He's a former adult bookstore operator. He's a rock musician, born-again Christian, not an official spokesperson for the Parents Music Resource Center, but is a PMRC supporter. Nice to have you both on the show.
Good morning.
Now, I suppose we should preface this by showing you what we're talking about. Here is a video of Madonna in action, a sort of suggestive, and we'll see what you think of it in a moment. Married Sean Penn and lived happily ever after.
You gave her a few ice cubes and
What
pulled
we're
her
talking
off.
about here are some studies that show that more and more rock videos are loaded with the scenes depicting drug use, casual sex, and that an entire generation of kids could grow up thinking that violence, sadism, degrading sex, and drugs are okay. So that's what we're talking about. Really, Frank, it's nice to have you here, and why don't you tell us kind of what you told the people down in Washington?
Well, first I'm going to tell you what I told the guy out there in the hall, that this thing began as a discussion about lyrics, and what the PMRC has done to exacerbate the matter is put the business of videos. I mean, the television shows that cover this thing always show a bunch of video clips, you know, look at this. But originally they're talking about words, and that's
right.
really what it's
Which
about.
Are probably even more important.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, it would be better if we're going to limit the discussion to the actual words to the song, because that's what got the stuff started.
That's what the PMRC wants, is a rating system with the lyrics available
right.
to parents, right?
Yes.
That's right. And so what I suggested during the hearing, and because there's been a certain amount of news management that has occurred since the actual hearing, you probably haven't heard that I made the suggestion that the lyrics be printed on the back of the albums.
I did hear that, Frank, and I think that's a good idea.
But let's understand what it will take in order to put those lyrics on the back of the albums. When the PMRC started complaining about this, they were predated by the PTA, who actually asked for lyrics last year. And they went to the record companies and said, will you put the lyrics on? The record companies said no, and there was a good reason. They don't own the lyrics. Publishers and songwriters own the lyrics.
Copyright.
That's right. So I think that if they were to pay the publishers and the copyright owners to put the lyrics on there, there would be no problem. But you can't expect a third party to give up their rights to the exploitation of their lyrics, which is one of the ways in which they earn their living, because a few people want to have this particular kind of security. Because let's face it, if you don't like this kind of music, there is the children's section in the record store with the Smurf record and Lassie and Shop There.
In other words, you don't have to buy it if you don't like it.
And
excuse me, I have to interrupt you here, but
okay, go ahead.
Only because I feel that we're getting away from the issue a little bit. The issue began as looking at a situation where we're dealing with kids that are 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and we're all aware of that. And the real question is, are the lyrics that they're listening to day in and day out, do these lyrics influence them or condition them to any degree in regards to accepting certain things as a way of life? And the answer to this, I think anybody who's got eyes and ears, you know, would have to agree that it does to some degree condition them. Human beings are all conditioned by their environment. They're all conditioned by what they hear and what they're taught. And I know Frank agrees with me on that.
I don't. First of all,
I'll tell you why I said that as soon as I'll give you your chance to say that. Go ahead.
For instance, if you're talking about 8 and 9-year-old children, and one of the things that the ladies have been complaining about is songs that talk about oral sex at gunpoint. I've seen them on television. This song is about, you know, first of all, it's not proven that the song that they're talking about was about oral sex at gunpoint, but they think so. If you have an 8 or 9-year-old child and you have the child hear a song, suppose it was about oral sex at gunpoint, do they know what that means? Unless they live in a house where the parents are always talking about oral sex at gunpoint, do they know what
it might make them curious to find out, right?
Well, then
No,
it's the parents' job to tell them.
I disagree with you. These kids, you know, they're around other kids, okay? Some older, some
Other 8
younger.
or 9-year-olds.
And they're all exposed to this. And I would strongly suggest that you listen to the lyrics to the song yourselves. Because as intelligent human beings, there is no way you're going to listen to that song and tell me that that's not what they're talking about. All right. You accused, I had heard you on WXRK of referring to us as ostriches with our heads in the sand.
I never said that.
Oh, yes,
but
you
it
did.
sounds good.
I was listening to the interview. You had said if it were up to us, the national bird would be an ostrich.
Oh yeah, that's.
And my reference to the fact that you agree with the theory of conditioning was, in fact, you had said something to the effect, and I can't quote you because they would throw me off the set if I did, okay? But you had said something to the effect that you were defending the need for pornography and had said that that some men need this because they suffer from an inability to function in a sexual situation. Now, I'm not quoting you again,
I'd be
but
happy
that was
to
the
give you
gist
the
of it.
exact quote if you'd like to hear it.
Well,
Take it easy, Frank.
if you would like to do that on the air, that's up to you.
Well, I've done it on the air, and it
What
hasn't
I'm-
offended anybody. If you want
What
to
I'm
talk about
saying
logic,
is, it is a violation of FCC regulations.
What is?
Okay, the language that you used in that interview.
Well, let's not talk about Frank's language.
Okay.
Let's talk about the language that we're all talking
What
about.
I'm, what I'm getting at, the point I'm trying to make is
We all
that
know how Frank, you know.
the point I'm trying to make
Yes,
is that
sir.
there
Make
is
your
a
point and leave
contradiction.
me alone. You're going to get it.
I'm just saying there is a contradiction here. Okay.
There's no contradiction.
Yeah, you had
Look,
said that
I went
American men
down
suffer
there
from
and
an
I said-
inability to function because of the preaching of the church that sex is bad. Now, this to me says that what you're talking about is a form of conditioning, that they've been conditioned to the point where they can't function in a sexual situation because of their teaching. Now, what I'm saying is that 8 and 9 and 10, 11 and 12-year-old kids are a lot more susceptible to that kind of teaching, and that's exactly what they get from these records and from these groups that they look up to and they emulate and they idolize, and there's no getting around it, and not you or anybody else is going to tell me it's not so.
We got to pause. We'll come right back in just a moment. So we're talking about the controversy around rating the records with Frank Zappa and Rick Rizzi. So, okay, supposing the record industry decides to voluntarily go along with this and give their records an R, a PG, a G, just like the movies do. Do you think that's really going to help?
Yeah, I do, in a sense, because when you're talking about, in most cases, kids are adolescent kids, you know, a lot of these kids are school kids. They don't have jobs. All right, usually when they go to buy a record, 90% of the time they're getting the money from allowances and from, it gives parents an opportunity to at least, you know, to say to them, well, look, this isn't suitable for you, you know, and I would rather that you didn't bring this into the house. I'd rather you not be exposed.
Any objections
It's just
to that,
giving the
Frank?
parent an alternative.
Yeah, I have big objections to that. If you print the lyrics on the back, you as a parent get to determine whether or not it's an R or how you feel about it. If you set up a rating system, that means either a record company executive whose standards might be a little bit different than yours, because he's in Hollywood or New York, and you might live in Biloxi, Mississippi, and his idea of what's hardcore might be different than yours. If somebody else, an executive or a committee, makes the decision as to what to label a record, they are taking a right away from you. And it's also a type of censorship, the sneakiest, littlest, tiniest little beginning of a censorship that goes that way all the way across the
You see, the movies have done it for years, and what has happened is nobody's making G-rated movies. They're all going for that R.
Well, they are.
All right, they are going for the R rating, and, you know, that seems to be the way adults want it. Okay, that's fine. But on the other hand, all right, I know that my 11-year-old kid, if she tells me she's going to a movie, I know that she's not going to walk into a theater and see Deep Throat. Okay, that's my protection.
Because under 17 is not admitted
That's
without
exactly
a parent
right.
into the theater.
What I'm getting at here also is that we're not we're not trying to take away anybody's right to say anything. I'm the last person in the world who's going to try to take away somebody's freedom of speech. I do think that you're selling the American people short, all right? Because I don't think the people in this country would allow their constitutional rights to be taken away from them that easily, all right? I give them a lot more credit than that.
You know, many times in an album, the lyrics will be on the inside of the jacket sleeve. Do you think a great deal of writers actually would resent having their lyrics printed? Most of them are proud of their lyrics. I'm not sure that there might be a backlash against that.
Here's the problem. If you see lyrics on an album right now, the chances are that the person who's singing the album wrote the song and owns the publishing, so he's putting it on there as a public service. But what about the people who are songwriters who are not performers? They have rights to the exploitation of those lyrics. So if you want to have lyrics on everything, it's going to have to be across the board.
Perhaps that's what I'm saying. Perhaps it could be a voluntary thing.
Well, It won't be voluntary.
That's
because
exactly right, it won't be.
Here's the problem. If a person is an independent songwriter who's not a performer, they sell their songs to somebody like Linda Ronstadt or whatever, and you write love songs, okay? And then Linda or somebody else decides, well, just to give the album an extra little push, I'm going to record a song by Prince. So here's your love song along with 5 other love songs with absolutely no lascivious material in it at all, included on the same album with 1 song that's got something else in it, okay? If you have a rating system, that one little other song in there gives it an X, and you have just been stigmatized.
Frank, how would you handle it? You've been around this business a long time.
Well, what I've suggested is that the PMRC, if they really do have all the support, which they don't, they have only 10,000 letters as opposed to approximately 30 million record buyers in the United States. This is not the tail wagging the dog, this is the flea wagging the tail trying to wag the dog. And they want to have all this stuff installed. But if you want it, you should find a way to pay for it. And you shouldn't ask the artist to pay for it, the record company shouldn't pay for it, and the songwriter shouldn't pay for it.
The customer should pay for it.
Well, I don't even think the customer should pay for it because not all customers want it.
Well, who's going to pay for it, Frank?
The PMRC. If they want it so bad, let them figure out how to pay for
This
it.
isn't true.
Does it come down to the fact that the parents aren't doing their jobs?
That's nonsense. It really is nonsense. Really what it comes down to is, if you were to ask me how I would handle this, I would handle this exactly the way that we're trying to do it. Make people aware of what, I think a lot of parents just honestly are not aware of what the kids are listening to, and they need to be aware. And if this issue's done anything, it's at least, you know, awaken them to that fact.
That's right, I think it has.
What we're really talking about here is dollars and cents, all right? The companies don't want to spend the money. The artists don't want it for one reason, because when the parents become aware and they stop their kids from buying stuff that's, as far as I'm concerned, is trash if you're peddling it to 9, 10, 11-year-old kids, it's going to hit the artist's pocketbook, all right? And what it boils down to is that they're exploiting children.
All right, let's take a little studio vote right now. How many of you would like to see some voluntary controls on this kind of recording material? If you'll just applaud. Applaud. Okay, how many are content with the way things are going right now?
Would you ask them how many of them are parents?
Okay, good point. How many of you are parents?
Thank you.
Okay, I guess that is...
How many of them expect to be parents in the next 15 to 20 minutes?
Outside of you, Frank, none of us, I guess. Frank, thanks very much for coming by. Rick, nice to have you here.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with the news and the weather.